I don't know the source of my confidence when I was young, but I did well in school because in multiple choice exams, if I thought A was the right answer, I didn't read B, C, and D. It was the same thing with Mary Louise. She was the right one. I didn't look for B, C, and D. We had the same kind of sense of humor. As you can see, 68 years later, neither of us is bored. Mary Louise and we got married September 14th, 1942. We spent that night in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel and drove to Buck Hill Falls, which was a resort in the Poconos. And in September, there were very few people there. So we made love in every room in the hotel. Jill was born a year later, in September 43. Somehow, I can't imagine how she got pregnant, within the first 3 months we were married. I think we swam in the same swimming pool or something. I was called up in March of 1943. She knew that I had enlisted when we got married. Cornell gave me a diploma even though I had a couple more months to go. I was sent to Fort McClellan, Alabama for heavy weapons infantry. Heavy weapons was a water-cooled machine gun and a 80-millimeter mortar. And I was in a shape that I was never in before or will never be again. I was just bones and muscle. I arrived and the company commander called me in and said, "Harris, I see you graduated college." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Can you type?" Well, when I had gone in, I wanted to see the war. I didn't want to sit at a desk, so I denied that I could type. But by then I had walked far enough and ridden in enough gliders that I could type. So he said, "I'm going to make you company clerk." In September or October 1944, which was 3 or 4 months after the invasion of the Allies at Omaha Beach and Utah Beach, the 69th Infantry Division was ordered to Europe. Suddenly I was the first sergeant, which was the highest rank there was as an enlisted man. It was fantastic being able to short order drill 350 men. Company 10's hut, right shoulder, horns. Company, right, haste, horde, march. Yeah, hut, 2, 3, 4. Hut, 2, 3, 4. Hut, 2, 3, 4. I was in charge of the 20-man contingent to set up division headquarters in a town called Forges-les-Eaux near Le Havre. And our headquarters was a deserted convent. It was December and it was freezing and there was no heat and all the light bulbs had been stolen. So we broke up furniture and built fires and huddled around the fires. The Army, being the Army, sent nobody in this contingent who spoke French. And I had taken French in college. I mean, people who really want to speak French started in high school or before. In college, the emphasis was on reading and writing French, not speaking it. I went into a hardware store in Forges-les-Eaux, and I said, "Avez-vous des ampoules électriques?" And the man behind the counter said, "How many watts?" The Battle of the Bulge occurred shortly after we landed in France. And we were rushed to the front to relieve the 99th Division. It was in Meringen, and I saw my first dead. And the first I saw was a German soldier lying on a plank, which they were using as a litter, and a cat was sitting on his chest eating at the huge wound in his chest. And the next I saw was an American in a foxhole, still standing up with a bullet through his forehead. Fortunately, I don't think I ever got in a position where I could have been shot through the forehead. The 69th Infantry continued across Germany very rapidly until we got to Leipzig, not far from the Elbe River. Leipzig was a major battle. There was a war memorial there from the 1914 war, but the 69th did take Leipzig. Beyond Leipzig, to the east, was a small river called the Mulde, and not far from that, the Elbe. And from the east, the Russians were advancing toward the Elbe. Eisenhower's plan was to let the Russians take the bloodbath involved in taking Berlin. And after they had taken it, he planned a victory march composed of the crack Allied troops. With that in mind, he issued an order that no one was to cross the Elbe, that the link up with the Russians was going to take place in Berlin in the manner just described. So the 69th, sitting on the west bank of the Mulde, were ordered not to cross it. Two Americans separately, one was Lieutenant Kotzebue and the other was Lieutenant Robertson, each unknown to each other, got on a jeep with three other men and crossed the Mulde. Robertson's quartet got to the Elbe, waved to the Russians they could see on the other side. The Russians fired at them. They went into a German house, liberated a tablecloth, liberated a can of shoe polish, and made something that looked like the American flag and waved it. And the Russians came over in boats and got them and took them back for a drunken celebration. But at the end of the day, the Russian colonel, who was the equivalent of an American general, came in a Russian command car into our headquarters, followed by Lieutenant Robertson in his jeep. General Reinhardt, commanding officer of the 69th Division, shit a brick. His troops had violated a direct order. So he had me put these four men under guard, called for a warrant officer, and we began writing court-martial orders against the four. Meanwhile, he called Omar Bradley, who was command of First Army, Omar Bradley called Eisenhower, and Eisenhower said, promote them all one grade and send them to London on leave. So we didn't finish the court-martial papers. And he said, go back and do it over again, this time with photographers. So General Reinhardt and the Russian colonel were shaking hands on the cover of Life. The war in Europe was over. I got leave to go to Paris and was in Paris the day the Germans surrendered. I was as seasick going over and coming back as I was in the airborne, and I couldn't lie in a hammock without being sick. So I played poker 24/7 on the boat coming back. And when I got back, I had enough money to buy Mary Louise an engagement ring. And we went on up to Ithaca, where I was offered an instructorship in English at $1,800 a year. I didn't figure Mary Louise and I could live on that. So my father said, why don't you come in the shirt business and see how you like it? And paid me about four times what Cornell thought I was worth. I didn't like the shirt business. The men returning from service wanted only white shirts, and that went on for almost 10 years. My father and I went to New York on Tuesdays to buy fabric. I would ask questions, or I would say, why don't we do this? And the answer was always, we used to do that. I said, well, let's do it again, you know. I was a vice president for a short time, and then I was president. When I returned from the war and went to work at Eagle, I still tried to write nights and weekends, and actually did write a lot. And I had a very good agent who recently died, Don Congdon, who was able to sell one story to Harper's and another one that I wrote with a friend, Wally McLaughlin, to Collier's. And I have a lot of lovely rejection slips. We bought a house in Elkins Park on High School Road. Susan was born in July of 1947. We hired Lily Davis from 96 South Carolina in 1947, around the time Susan was born, 1950. Mary Louise was pregnant with Prue, and we moved to a larger house on Fairview Road. Lily was a live-in cook, housekeeper, babysitter, very competent, very intelligent. One Sunday morning, Jill and I were driving somewhere, and about a dozen maids were waiting on a corner for a bus for their day off. Jill said, are all black ladies maids? And I explained to her no, that there were black lady doctors and dentists and teachers, postmasters. And we got home and she walked in the house and she said to Lily, Lily, what color you wish you were? And Lily said, purple.